Once upon a time, there was a king and queen who lived in a beautiful pink palace surrounded by a magnificent garden. One day, the king had to leave his palace and make a long journey to visit another king who lived far, far away. The queen felt very sad when the king drove off, leaving her all alone. In the palace garden near the lily pool, there stood a great stone frog. Many years before, a frog had saved the land by crying bug up, in his deep voice to warn the people of an approaching enemy. And in gratitude, they had built this statue. It was a magic statue, and whenever there was any danger, it came to life.
Bug up. Bug up. Tell them why the queen is so unhappy. Tell them the story of the palace. Bug up.
But where shall I begin?
Why, at the beginning, of course. Bug up. Bug up.
Very well, then. In another part of the palace lived the housekeeper, Miss Hustle Bustle, and the 8 chambermaids. Jennifer, Barbara, Ellen, Margaret, Jean, Joan, Jane, and Felicity. Mrs. Hustle Bustle was a kind, good-natured woman who never made the little girls work too hard. Very different from Mr. Pudding Bowl, the head cook. He had 8 kitchen boys, each one more mischievous than the next. In fact, they were so naughty, I'm not even going to tell you their names. This is the king's favorite horse, Abdullah. He's a full-blooded Arabian stallion. Abdullah wondered why the king hadn't used him for the long journey. But a king can't always do as he wants. And when kings visit each other, they must travel in royal carriages. The queen felt very lonely when the king was gone. Even more so because they didn't have a child, although they had always wanted one. She wandered sadly through the garden, trying to find some comfort in the rare plants and beautiful flowers which the king had brought back from other journeys. Oh, she would gladly have given all these and more for just one little child. So you see, in the midst of all these beautiful things, the queen was very unhappy. Now, if you sit very still and listen very carefully, you can hear the queen's heart singing its sweet, sad, and lonely song.
A beautiful sound goes through the world, and those who hear it are blessed. It warms you like the sunshine and comforts you like the soft wind's caress. A beautiful song goes through the world, and those who hear it smile. The most beautiful sound in the world is the laughter of a child.
Suddenly, the queen found herself in a wild and tangled corner of the garden, far from the paths and flower beds she knew so well. There was a crumbling old wall and a high brick tower, which the Queen was sure she had never seen before. And in fact she hadn't, because this was the home of a wicked fairy, and it became visible only once every 100 years. High up in the tower, like a spider in a web, the wicked fairy waited.